Well, meanwhile, the US Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, is currently in Moscow for his first official visit. Earlier this morning, Mr. Tillerson and his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, came face-to-face in front of the press, though one journalist was keen to get their question in first.
How confident are you, Mr. Secretary?
Who was beating you up? Who was giving you your letters?
Well, meanwhile, our correspondent, Ilya Petrenko, reports from the venue in central Moscow.
It all began with a handshake at the Foreign Ministry Villa door, which is just around the corner. And usually it takes Sergei Lavrov or anyone who is visiting him here just a few minutes to proceed to the main negotiations hall for a handshake in front of the cameras. This time, instead, U.S. Secretary of State and the Russian Foreign Minister spent about 20 minutes in a separate room, only being accompanied by U.S. Ambassador in Moscow, John Teft. And we don't know what happened there behind closed doors, but the curious journalists, scores of them, were waiting in the main hall. We do understand that Sergei Lavrov speaks perfect English, so perhaps they had a quick chat. So then the top diplomats finally came out, a quick handshake, no jokes, and they went straight to the table. When they sat down, one of the American journalists started screaming out a question, to which Sergei Lavrov responded by asking a question: who brought you up? Who taught you manners? And then he went on with his opening remarks, where despite not hearing the word ultimatum from the American diplomat yet, Sergei Lavrov referred to the hint at an ultimatum by Rex Tillerson before he embarked on his flight to Moscow. Take a listen.
We've said multiple times that we're prepared for constructive, equal dialogue. This is our consistent policy. It is not influenced by political requirement or a false choice, whether with us or against us. We believe in collective actions and don't see it as productive to have closed-door alliances.
To this, the U.S. Secretary of State responded that all lines of communication between Russia and the U.S. should still be open. There are many tactical differences, he said, but also he went on to say that they need to do everything to narrow at least the most sharp differences. Now, understandably, Rex Tillerson is under great pressure. It's his first visit as U.S. Secretary of State in Russia, and also it happens just on the back of the major Syria escalation. And just as Sergei Lavrov and Rex Tillerson are talking behind these walls in Moscow, this interview by Donald Trump came out in the U.S.
Putin is backing a person that's truly an evil person. And I think it's very bad for Russia. I think it's very bad for mankind. It's very bad for this world. This is an animal.
The motorcades of both top diplomats have left from right here. It is now time for a break. When it comes to Mr. Tillerson, perhaps time to make a phone call back to Washington before the press conference, which is just as crucial as the meeting itself. And that's where perhaps the journalists won't get a telling off from Mr. Lavrov for asking questions.
Well, Ilya is posting all the latest updates from the talks on his Twitter feed. You can check it out for latest details of the meeting, both formal and the more informal ones. Well, Rex Tillerson and Sergei Lavrov won't be short of topics to discuss. The alleged chemical attack in Syria and Washington's subsequent missile strike all came just days ahead of the new Secretary of State's first official visit to Russia. RT's Caleb Morpin looked at how the stage was set ahead of the meeting.
Americans love a good show, or rather, to show off, or both. It was an expensive performance, costing over $110 million. But after the fireworks were over, the Syrian airbase was functional the next day. But whatever, the audience loved it.
Overnight retaliation from his Florida estate of passionate President Trump.
We see these beautiful pictures at night. I am tempted to quote the great Leonard Cohen, "I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons."
With explosions in the background, Tillerson is now talking tough and delivering ultimatums.
Would Russia prefer to realign with the United States, or Russia can maintain its alliance with this group, which we believe is not going to serve Russia's interests longer term.
Washington made sure that China had a front row seat. Trump's timing with Xi was impeccable. He made sure that he was there just as the airstrikes happened. Trying to impress anyone?
It's an honor to have you in the United States. We're going to have a very, very great relationship, and I look very much forward to it.
When sending a message to China on North Korea, Trump is putting on quite a show. He's already made clear that if Beijing is unwilling to act, then Washington may act alone. He's already sent a mighty Navy strike fleet to Korea's shores. Yes, there's been lots of drama and explosions, but was it all just theatrics?
I can't even comment on what theatrics are, because I would hate to think that when something as important as claims of death, something that would precipitate warfare and further potential human loss of life, that we wouldn't use anything that would involve the politically theatrical. But I will tell you this much, that anybody who spends any amount of time in what was said and what was alleged by Cy Hirsch and others regarding Ghouta and other instances where Syria was absolutely, positively accused of being involved in gassing, and there was question then, again to this day, especially when you have rebel groups and other groups who are known to have similar weapons. It's too confusing. So what I want to, myself, what I hope we do, is that we go back to what I said initially. I want there to be proof, and not pretext, and not suspicion.
Yes, it got great reviews in American media. Even former Trump critics raved about it. But arguably one of the most important audience members, Russia's President Vladimir Putin, he didn't seem deeply moved.
Citing our wonderful comedy writers Ilf and Petrov, I want to say this is boring, ladies. We have all seen and watched this before.
But the show must go on. Caleb Maupin, RT, New York.